everyone, my name is Taryn with Quest, and today's presentation is Activity Guide Composer, Unleashing the Power of Activity Guides, and today's presenter is Jeremy and Andrew with Oracle. So a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. All attendee lines are in mute and will stay in mute throughout this session. If you do have any questions, please put those into the question drop-down box. We will be answering those throughout and at the end of today's session. And this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Quest content library, and everyone will receive an email when that is available. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy and Andrew.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. Again, my name is Jeremy Pelly. I'm a product strategy director as part of the PeopleSoft development team. And we also have on the phone with us today, Andrew Giampetro, who is our lead HCM architect. I'm very excited to be able to do this presentation with you and to have Andrew along as well. First, we'll show the safe harbor statement. Everything we're going to talk about today is generally available. It's available within your release that you currently have. If you are up to date on the application, it is there as of today. However, in some of the questions and some of the things that we talk about, we may talk about things that are future coming or things that we're looking at doing. So in the event that we do talk about things that are coming in the future, the safe harbor statement applies. That just like within your organization, sometimes within Oracle, our roadmap is fluid and we base our roadmap on information that's gathered from our customers and we adjust accordingly. Okay, so what are we talking about today? So we're going to talk about Activity Guide Composer, why we have Activity Guide Composer, kind of what's the reason behind overall Activity Guide Composer, an overview, delivered uses of Activity Guide Composer in HCM. So where have we already used it and delivered things to you in it? We're going to spend a lot of our time going through Activity Guide Composer, and during that time in our demo, we want to spend quite a bit of time there. That's when we want, if we're going through the demo and we're on a certain page and you have a question about that page, feel free to chat those things during that time, and we'll try to be monitoring that and answer those as we come. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. And if for some reason we run out of time, because we do know that Quest has several webinars today, with it being PeopleSoft Day, and if we run out of time, then we will get back to you with the answers to those questions that you might have. So let's start with what is Activity Guide Composer. Activity Guide Composer is a framework that resides at the application level and utilizes PeopleTools Activity Guide framework. So a lot of people have heard of Activity Guides. They've been around for a long time, but Activity Guide Composer is a little newer, right? And so Activity Guide Composer was actually created by the HCM team inside of PeopleSoft, and it was designed to help us be able to better use activity guides and to be able to present things within activity guides in an easier way to understand to both our technical and functional users. Activity Guide Composer does not replace activity guides. That's a big part. A lot of people have asked questions, is Activity Guide Composer separate from activity guides? It's really there to enhance the activity guide and to make it more intuitive and to make it more interactive. And so think of Activity Guide Composer as a layer on top of activity guides. There's things that PeopleTools activity guides do that is not in Activity Guide Composer, but for the most part, Activity Guide Composer just makes activity guides simpler, and it sits on top of activity guides within PeopleTools. So it's not a replacement, it's literally just something that sits on top to make things easier. It was developed by HCM, and it was originally, depending on what Pum version you're in or on within your organization, we're going to be talking about it as it exists today, which is it's an enterprise component, and it's available to HCM, ELM, CRM, Campus Solutions, and will soon be available to FSCM because it's a part of enterprise components, and each of those applications can take up enterprise components within their application. Originally, it was under the menu item a part of Setup HCM, so it was only available to HCM. And so if you've been on it for a while, or you're a few Pum releases behind, you may find application or Activity Guide Composer under the Setup HCM area. If you're on a current Pum release, you'll see it under Enterprise Components. And if you're outside of HCM, it'll be part of Enterprise Components. So the reason behind Activity Guide Composer really was greater flexibility. It was to demystify those people tools activity guides and gain greater adoption to it. It also gave us the ability to utilize the activity guides more readily within functionality that we are delivering. And so you'll see when we get to the page in the part of the presentation where we talk about things that we're delivering in Activity Guide Composer, we're delivering more and more within activity guides because it makes a lot of sense to do so. And we're utilizing Activity Guide Composer because it gives more flexibility and it gives you more visibility into what we're doing. It gives us the number one reason probably behind this, and Andrew's going to talk about this as he talks about the architecture behind Activity Guide Composer, is it allows us to separate out that technical function from that functional function. And when I say the functional function, I'm not talking about end users, I'm talking about those super users within your organization that are there and they do a lot of configuration type steps within your application. That those are the functional users I'm talking about. In some organizations, that may reside within your IT and may be a business analyst. In some organizations, that may be an HRIS and be in that group. We're not necessarily telling you that this is done by a person in IT and this is done by a person in HR. What we're saying is we've separated out functions so that within your organization, you have the ability to decide who does different aspects of things within Activity Guide Composer. And you'll see that we have an area of the system that's very technical, and you're going to see things on the page such as people code and app packages and things. That's going to be your more technical people, right? That's going to be your developers and your more technical staff. Then you're going to see other things that are going to be around how you set up, how you configure the system. That's going to be your business analyst, or in some areas, people call them HRIS consultants or HRIS analysts. So that was the idea behind Activity Guide Composer, is to really give you those segregations of duties. And then we wanted to give you some utilities to make deploying activity guides to your end user easier. And that we'll go through some of those utilities. We may not hit on every single one of them, but we want to talk about some of the utilities that we've provided. Okay, so I'm going to let Andrew give a little bit of an idea of kind of the overview of Activity Guide Composer and what the reasoning and how we broke it up technically and functionally.
Thanks, Jeremy. So for Activity Guide Composer, when we looked at developing this framework, we were really struggling at the time when we look at activity guides in People Tools is such a blank canvas, right? There's like, when we looked at the configuration, it's very technical. It was very difficult to kind of convey, okay, this is how you can, set up your activity guides. You need to have a technical resource to do it. And so, one of our first challenges is, well, how do we separate out that technical? There's no way we can kind of completely make it all functional, but how do we start to separate this? And the way we chose to do it is we came up with the idea of an activity guide category, and that category would support a set of activity guide templates. And so in that category are all like the technical building blocks that are needed for an activity guide. So just to give you an idea, Jeremy talked about some app packages and, some of the technical logic that resides behind some of these things. So every time you create when you define a template, for each template, you have to have some type of method that says, an application package method that says, when you create an instance of this template and the user is going to be working with an instance of the template, there has to be logic that supports that. And so, so we deliver a starting point for you, for the technical resource to see what that instance creation method is, right? And then there's every button that you have in an activity guide also has app package logic behind it. Every step in an activity guide, when the step gets saved, could have some app package people code behind it that triggers something else. Even like retrieving images to display in the sub banner of an activity guide. Again, it's another technical app package that has to be designed. So, so all that configuration happens inside the category, and we'll take a look at a category when we go through our demo. Even like assignees, you know, when we made some enhancements to activity guides to handle multi-user activity guides. So if you have a process that an employee and a manager needs to access different steps in an activity guide, you could define those assignees in the category, and then your functional user, you know, when they go to define the template, they'll see these things as options, you know, that they could assign to different steps. So it makes it a much simpler process. So I'm starting to talk about the functional side, you know, activity guide composer itself. So when the user uses the composer, they're just selecting, you know, maybe the type of activity guide template they want to create. We allow for 3 different versions. You know, you could either have train stops at the top, which is like the horizontal sequential, or you can have all the steps on the left panel and they can be displayed as vertical sequential or vertical non-sequential. And so then once they select that category for the template, all of a sudden all these options become available to that functional user to kind of pick and choose. Yes, I want to have this action button in my activity guide, or I only want to select these steps. You know, so the category drives what steps the user can select and put into the activity guide. And it makes it a much easier process for a functional user to maintain that template. They don't need to know all the technical details behind that step and the fact that there's a related action that's associated to every step in the activity guide, and that related action requires certain parameters so that it takes the user directly to, you know, an employee's information for a particular step. The functional user doesn't have to worry about that. The functional user is like, yeah, this step takes them to their job information, or this step takes them to their employee address, self-service transaction. That's all the functional user needs to see in creating an activity guide process. And like we said, in addition to splitting things out, there's certain utilities that a technical user will use, and there's certain utilities that a functional user can use under activity guide framework. So on the technical side, you know, we gave the ability to clone categories. So if you see a category that we deliver and you feel like, well, we're going to really modify this category, we don't want to change what you guys gave us. So we can clone that category, and you can work off of that cloned category in defining your activity guide templates. One of the new features that we provided, you know, a couple images ago was activity guide tiles, giving you the ability to create a tile that can directly take the person to, you know, an activity guide instance, so that you don't have to build your own landing page. You know, you'll notice a lot of activity guides that we deliver a place where the activity guide gets started, you know, and where the user can go back in and access that activity guide. But the framework has other ways in which the user can access, you know, an activity guide. We have the ability to use My Processes, which is an ability for the user to go in and see what processes, activity guide processes they can initiate. And then on top of that, you know, we have these tiles that can be put on the home pages where the user can click into and start an activity guide or review, you know, an activity guide that's in progress. So that's at a high level, you know, of the overview of Activity Guide Composer. And if we go to the next slide. Jeremy, was there another slide here?
No, that was the only one that you added in.
Oh, there was another slide, sorry. But there was another slide, and one of the other things I wanted to talk about, you know, the framework was, you know, one of the things that this framework allows the application teams to do is it gives us a mechanism to deliver an example of an activity guide process. And
Andrew, is it this one?
Yeah, that one. So I
Okay.
really want to talk about the greater flexibility. It really gives the third bullet point here, the ability for apps to deliver templates that can easily be tailored to their requirements, to your requirements. I mean, that was probably, one of the biggest pieces, because if we just delivered you a People Tools activity guide template, which customers can do, they can go directly into People Tools, create their own activity guide templates, build out their own pages, to initiate them, and for users to access those instances of that template. You guys could do all that stuff, but we felt if we delivered that template, it then becomes a technical job for a technical user to kind of make all these modifications. And the fact that we're able to deliver this stuff through an activity guide composer framework, you already have a more functional starting point if you want to take out a step. Or if you say, you know what, this step really doesn't apply to us, and we only need to add in one step. So you have your technical user update the category with the one step that needs to be added, and then your functional user can easily modify the template and maintain it. The other thing that we did with Activity Guide was, People Tools Activity Guides are not effective dated. The framework, the Activity Guide Composer framework, handles that effective data logic, and that gave more flexibility in terms of, maybe you want to change your onboarding template for the new year. Well, now you can put out a future dated effective data row and start working on that template, right? And start making those changes for upcoming year. With People Tools Activity Guide templates, you wouldn't be able to do that. So we really tried to make this framework, make it so much easier to manage and create your activity guide templates. So Jeremy, that's all I wanted to really cover on this slide.
Okay, great. So where have we delivered activity guides within HCM? So again, it was Activity Guide Composer was developed by the HCM team, so we have more that we've done with HCM. It's just recently been made available to other PeopleSoft applications, and will be made available to FSCM, or it is available for FSCM to uptake as soon as they get ready to uptake it into their application. And I saw one of the questions that came out was when will FSCM uptake it within their application? Andrew, you may know that, but I'm not sure. I don't actually know that. But this is where we've delivered it within Activity Guide Composer within HCM. So we started with onboarding and life events. So those are the two life events about halfway down here. Those were the first two that came out of the box whenever we came out with Activity Guide Composer in HCM. And a lot of the pieces that we did was built in order for those two to come to fruition, those two capabilities. Since then, we've also done offboarding, and we enhanced Activity Guide Composer whenever we did offboarding. We've also done HCM Fluid Position Management, HCM Fluid Benefits Open Enrollment, HCM Extended Absence Request, and as part of the questionnaire framework, the Create Questionnaire is also in Activity Guide Composer. And so as time goes on, you're going to see more and more things that we deliver, capabilities within the system that use a guided process. That we're not only using activity guides to take you through that guided process, but we're actually using Activity Guide Composer so that you have more visibility and more flexibility in how you utilize it. For example, onboarding and offboarding, we're going to go through an offboarding example when we go through our demo. You're going to see that the very heart and the key of those two functionalities, those are new functionalities within the system, is based around Activity Guide Composer, and you're going to go in there, and that's going to be the heart of how that application works. Whereas position management, benefits open enrollment for fluid benefits open enrollment, that uses functionality that's already been in the system. Position management's been around forever. Open enrollment's been around since BenAdmin first came on board, or soon after, actually, at least with the PIA instance of PeopleSoft 8.0 a long time ago. And so this was just the ability to take those things that already existed, and as we were fluidizing those components and making them fluid, we decided to put them inside of Activity Guide Composer because it made sense. It made sense to give you a guided way to go through those processes. It made sense to give you some of the tools that Activity Guide Composer gives you with having flexibility around showing different pages within the component. It just made a lot of sense to add those things in. So I think that as time goes on and as images continue to come out, you're going to see this list just continue to grow with more functionality, more of the admin tools as we fluidize different admin components. You may see, if it makes sense, you may see those be utilized in Activity Guide, and if they do, you'll see them as Activity Guide Composer. And then other functionality, such as new functionality like onboarding and the questionnaire and offboarding, you're going to see those things utilize Activity Guides when it makes sense. And when it does make sense to utilize Activity Guides, we're going to be utilizing Activity Guide Composer even internally as we build out those Activity Guides. All right, so at this time we're going to go to a demo, and as part of the demo, I want to make sure that you know that you can chat and ask questions during the demo. The main reason there is what we don't want is we don't want to have to keep coming back to a certain page. So if you have a question on a certain page that we go to, please ask the question, chat the question, and we'll try to get to it while we're there in that page. And whether I'm talking or whether Andrew's talking, we'll keep an eye on the questions as they come in as well. We may, like I said, if we miss some, just ask them at the end. All right, so I'm logged into PeopleSoft. I'm logged into an HCM environment. I'm going to go to Enterprise Components. I'm logged in as PS. And so everything that you see as I'm logged in is part of your demo system. If you were to look at your demo system and log in as PS with the latest image, you would see what I'm seeing. Okay, and so under Enterprise Components, we have Activity Guide Composer. And here you have all the different pieces that make up Activity Guide Composer. And we're going to talk about several of these today. So we're going to talk about categories. We're going to talk about templates. You've heard us talk a little bit about that. We'll touch on notifications. And then we're going to talk about the utilities that are also available within Activity Guide Composer. Okay, so let's start with the category. All right, and for the purpose of this, I'm going to pull up the offboarding category just because we're going to use offboarding kind of as our sample. The categories that we pre-deliver are delivered with the 11-1900 row, as is common with a lot of our system data. The categories that we deliver with the 11-1900 row, you cannot change that 1900 row. You can add a new row on top of it and effective date it in any way you want to. You can also clone our categories, and there's good reasons that you may want to do one versus the other. I get asked all of the time, well, when would I take your category and just add my own effective data row versus cloning the category and starting afresh? And there's different times that you would want to do different ones. For onboarding and offboarding, those are where I normally get asked the question. I oftentimes say just add effective data rows because there is other processes and things on the installation table that you have to tell us what category that you're using for those processes. So if you clone it, then you have to go back and you have to change those. And then you also have to start new with the templates because you can't clone a template to a different category. So if you clone our templates, it clones to our category. And we'll get into that whenever we talk about templates. But let's go through and talk about the category. I'm going to let Andrew, I'm going to drive through the page. I'm going to let Andrew talk about these pages because this is the technical side of Activity Guide Composer, as Andrew just explained.
So what we have here is, I talked about every time, when you create an Activity Guide template, every time the user accesses the Activity Guide, they create an instance that's specific to that user typically. And so this instant creation method has additional logic in it to kind of set up some of the steps in the Activity Guide. So we deliver a couple different flavors of the instant creation method, but it has logic in there that ensures that the user creating the Activity Guide will have the correct security to access that Activity Guide. Maybe there's certain steps that are getting assigned a certain start date or end date or due date when they need to be completed, and that logic is it's configurable, and so that logic is also triggered when the instance is being created. There's also, we have a questionnaire feature, so depending upon how the user answered the questionnaire before they started the Activity Guide, we evaluate the response, and then turn on or off certain steps in that activity guide. So this instant creation method has a lot of logic in it that we use to kind of control and tailor that activity guide instance for the user that's creating it, from the template. So that's what this app package ID and path and instant creation ID, all this stuff has to be defined in the app designer under an application package. And we give you an example to start with, right? So if you wanted to code your own, you could take a look at where we started and you could define your own if you really wanted to. But again, we try to cover all our bases, when we put this example out there. So it should cover 95% of your needs.
Okay. So let's kind of go through the tabs. Security is basically given that way you can give security to the categories, right? So you may have different people that handle different security, and this allows you to actually secure the categories. So this is telling you who has access to be able to modify this category. Anything else there, Andrew?
Nah, it's pretty straightforward. It just handles who could manage the category, who's the administrator of the category, who's allowed to make changes. Because when you change a category and there are some templates that already exist for that category, they will get updated. So the person, we wanted to secure that activity so that just nobody comes in here, changes your configuration and impacts, a bunch of your templates.
Yeah, and so this is also more and more important as we are adding more and more things to Activity Guide Composer, right? So take, for example, position management. You may not want very many people to have access to change and modify things within position management. That's an administrative component used by very few people within your organization. But you may want more people to be able to access things like onboarding and offboarding. So as we add more and more functionality that we deliver within Activity Guide Composer, this becomes more and more important as to who you allow and what kind of segregation you give. Context, I'll let Andrew speak to this one.
So context is always a confusing concept when you talk about activity guides. The best way, the technical kind of the description is that context keys that you define for your activity guide uniquely identify every instance that is created from that template. So for example, let's say I have an activity guide for, in this case, offboarding. Well, when I create an instance of that activity guide, what is that, who is that instance for, right? This is for an offboarding process. So what is the context of that instance? Well, it's probably going to be an EMPL ID and EMPL record, right? It's going to be specific to an employee that exists in the system. So the context, basically kind of uniquely identifies that activity guide instance and who that instance pertains to. When I access that activity guide instance, I'm accessing offboarding for a specific employee, and so that's at the highest level. It's the easiest way I can explain it, but it really we stumble over it because when we try to get technical and say, well, these are keys and these keys uniquely identify the activity guide instance for somebody, some people get lost with that. So, it is the context. When I'm accessing this activity guide, who is this instance for? Why? What am I accessing inside this instance? So like for like a non-HR example would be, let's say I have an activity guide that's accessing an expense report, right? Well, what is the expense report number that I'm accessing? That would be the context that you would define for an activity guide that's accessing a specific expense report, right? And then other thing that we provided is this derived contextual data. We found out when we implemented it for onboarding that we just didn't want to display the employee's ID or anything. When you're in the activity guide, you could view these context fields. We wanted to display the employee's name. We wanted to display their job title that they're being hired into. So this contextual data is data that can be derived from these context keys. So using that EMPL ID, I can figure out the person's name. or using the person's EMPL ID and EMPL record, I could figure out the job code that they're assigned to and get that job code description. So that's what the context is really covering.
Okay. Okay, actions.
So each action inside an activity guide they appear as buttons in the sub banner of the activity guide. And so when we were doing offboarding, we realized we had some steps where, you know, we really can't validate whether the person is done with the step. You know, so in some cases we needed to have a mark complete button so that the user could say, yeah, I'm done with this step. I've added all my emergency contacts. You know, so we just couldn't say, well, just after you add your first one, you must be done with this step. You know, we couldn't make that decision. So in certain cases, you'll have these buttons, these action buttons that you could define for your activity guide. They could either mark the step complete. They could even allow the user to cancel the activity guide and delete the instance if you wanted to have that type of capability. So you could put a lot of power behind these actions that you could define for your category. But again, there's a specific method and there's people code behind that has the logic that performs this mark complete or performs the cancel.
Okay. Images.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see a change. Sorry. Yeah, for images, the same type of thing. You could either, you know, define a specific image. There's two different types, or you could retrieve the image. And in this case, this is an example of retrieving the image, you know, based upon where we're trying to retrieve the employee's photo. So we're going to use that context of that EMPL ID to go out and retrieve the employee's photo to display this in the sub banner of the activity guide. You could use the image to maybe just brand your activity guide if you want to show your company logo in the sub banner of the activity guide. And there's a way you could just select that image as opposed to having to use an app package. So for assignees, there's two different types of ways you can identify somebody who's assigned to a step in an activity guide. You could either use a security role, or you could use an application package. So the application package would have logic to say, okay, you know, let me use the context of the activity guide, which is, let's say in this case, an employee ID, and I want to find this employee's manager, right? And so you could have an app package that has the logic that's retrieving that employee's manager so that I could assign some steps to the employee and I could assign some steps to the manager. And this assignee capability was, you know, purely added for these multi-user activity guides that we were hearing feedback on, that, you know, some of your organizations really want to create, you know, an onboarding process that includes an employee, maybe includes an HR administrator, maybe includes the manager. And you know, you define your assignees in the category, and then when you create your template, you'll just be able to select and assign this individual to a step. And then all the logic behind this, you know, some of it has to be created, you know, in App Designer by creating an app package, or somebody who has access to create that security role in security. So the next part of it is, this is probably the most important part, is, you know, the steps that can be added to an activity guide template. Every step that gets added to an activity guide is really a related content service. You know, and a related content service is a very technical service that allows you to, you know, that will take you to a specific component in the page. It can take you to a different URL. It has a lot of capabilities, but PeopleTools activity guides are dependent upon you defining the step with a related content service. So when we deliver you a category, we try to deliver like all the different types of steps that we feel make sense for this category. You could add your own steps, you know, but we try to give you a full list of all the steps that we think may need to be in there. And again, you could tailor, you know, by taking away steps or adding steps to your template. For each step, there's additional configuration, and again, it's some of this is very technical. You know, if once the step is saved, you can have post-processing people code perform additional logic after the step gets saved. That's the post-processing people code that's specified here. You can integrate this step with AWE, so with our approval workflow engine. So when the step goes, if the step is generating an approval, right? If the step is generating an approval, when that approval is approved or denied, you can update the status of the step. So if it gets approved, the step status goes to complete. If it gets denied, or pushed back, maybe the user goes back in and has to change their request and submit it again. But you can have AWE integration, control the status of the step based upon what happens with the approval. Related data is another way of passing information into a step. There's additional step context. So the step itself may have its own unique context in order to access and display the right data. A step could have its own action. So for this particular step, there's a specific action that I want in the sub banner for the user to execute. And then at the bottom, we have default step assignments. So you could say for certain steps, this is always a manager step. You know what I mean? There's no reason for you to really change this. And this is to help with data entry, when the user's creating a template, so that they don't have to, you could default the steps if it's always going to go to a manager, and this is a step that's only used by a manager. You could default that in when the user adds the step to the activity guide template. So again, just a lot of power here, and for different steps, we have a couple different steps, like a video step. We do have a video step that allows the user to configure a video transcript, which is kind of important for accessibility. So there are a couple different additional configuration that shows up for some of our specific video steps, information only steps, and summary steps. Those steps are kind of pre-delivered steps that we felt that users would put into an activity guide. So they function a little bit different. You'll see another area where the user can kind of define additional configuration for a video step.
Okay. All right, let's scroll back up.
Yeah, they may not have an example of that in this one.
Yeah, the offboarding one doesn't have a video step, so.
And then recently we've added, when we did multi-user activity guides, we realized the need to have notifications. The need to say, when that activity guide instance is created, there may be 5 people that I have to notify that here's an activity guide instance that you could start to work. We also realized that we had to handle dependencies. So maybe, there's a dependency that the manager has to complete a step, and there's really nothing for the employee to do just yet. And so that we would have to generate a notification, like when the manager completes their step, now the employee can work, their employee step. And so this configuration, the notification configuration tab on the category allows you to start to set up those notification options. Again, the initial notification that goes out, when the step becomes available for the user to work, you could have notifications for overdue. So if you're using a due date on your steps, you could send out a notification saying, hey, your step is now overdue. It should have been completed a couple days ago. And then reminders, that you could have a reminder every 5 days, send out another reminder. Hey, this activity guide is still open. There's still something for you to work in this activity guide instance. So that's the notification functionality. We really felt that was really important for multi-user activity guides. For activity guides where it's only one user, typically you wouldn't need this, but you can still leverage it if you wanted to send that one user a reminder and keep telling them, yeah, your onboarding, is still needs to be completed. You still have a couple steps that need to be completed by you. So you could use this notification for both, but this was really born out of, multi-user activity guides.
Perfect. So I'm going to say one thing about categories, and then we have a few questions, Andrew. So one thing to keep in mind about categories, especially when you get to like notifications and some of these things, you're setting up what's available to the template. Okay, so you're not setting up something that that every single template is necessarily going to have. You're setting up something that every single template that you create off of this category has the option to have. So for example, notifications, what you set up here is going to be the default, but each template you still have the ability to change that. So this isn't a setup one time and it's true for everything. Just like the steps, if you have 24 steps, that doesn't mean every template you have has 24 steps. That means that when you go to create a template, you have 24 steps to choose from, and you customize them and configure that template the way that you want to. Okay, so let's go. Let's ask a couple of questions since we're here in the category setup. And the first question was, what role, specific role, is needed for Activity Guide Composer to show up? Do you happen to know that, Andrew, off the top of your head?
Yeah, we deliver 2 roles for Activity Guide Composer. There's an Activity Guide Composer administrator, and then there's an Activity Guide Composer user. You know, so the administrator will get access to everything that, you know, Jeremy was showing you, categories, templates, you know, all those configuration pieces, whereas an Activity Guide Composer user only gets access to the pieces of the component, the pieces of the framework that they use inside an activity guide. So we do deliver 2 roles, and you could utilize those 2 roles, or you could, you know, create your own roles to replace them.
All right, great. And we're being asked several times by several people different questions about Pum Images, and so I'll ask the more generic question, or the one that's going to give the most information. So, what image did we originally do Activity Guide Composer for HCM? And then the other questions are what image are we currently showing this in, and what tools release are we in? Okay,
so the image that we first delivered activity guides and the tools release, I think it was image 23 when we delivered onboarding. And that was on, and you had to have minimum tools of 855. We've delivered, I think, this multi-user activity guide and notification and all that functionality was delivered in 31. And that's when we migrated the framework to enterprise components. Minimum tools was still 855. I'm trying to think, there's one other update we did for single component activity guides that support like the position management activity guide that we delivered. I believe that was delivered in image like 26, I want to say. You know, this framework will work for 855. There are some 857 and 858 enhancements that we made to the framework. So for 857, there was an enhancement for I have to go back, but I know 858 right now. 858 gave us the ability to hide steps, you know, that the current user is not assigned to. That was a requirement by one of our customers that, you know, yeah, we have an onboarding process, but we don't want to show them the admin steps, you know, so is there any way to hide that? So that was a big enhancement for 858. For 857, there was some enhancements around the sub-banner and different sub-banner options that you can display for your fluid activity guide. And those were probably the big enhancements. If I think of any more, I'll have to put it into a separate note.
Okay. And this demo that we're showing right now is on the latest image and the latest tools. So is that 31 or 32?
Actually, this is probably what's going to be coming out pretty soon. So I think you'll see hide steps. This okay. Could be coming out in 34.
34. Okay.
Yeah. And there's only one major change in 34, so it's the hide step.
All right, and this is and the tools version we're showing is 858. So.
85802, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let me go. What is the navigation for Activity Guide Composer? Like Andrew said, it's under Enterprise Components. If you're on the latest, prior to that, it was set up at HCM, but Enterprise Components and then Activity Guide Composer. Sorry, kind of going through some of these. Some of these are very specific. Okay.
In terms of the,
Okay.
I mean, I know we're not supposed to give out images, but for FSCM, it's most likely going to be image 36, which is not the next image coming out, but the image following, because image 35 will be coming out. That's our first image that's on 858, and so there was some 858 work that they were doing in that image, and so I think it's image 36 that FSCM will see the Activity Guide Composer framework.
Okay. One person asked, is guided self-service transactions in manager self-service related at all to activity guides?
So
I don't
know they're not related to activity guides. Guided self-service was one of they do use a People Tools activity guide template, but their template is not managed and maintained by Activity Guide Composer.
Okay. All right. And we'll do this last question before we go back and show templates. It says, should our developers be able to add new steps with proper components that go in between as per business requirements? So if we deliver a activity guide composer, for example, can the developer add a new step in between that is custom, say, for this custom page? That's what the question is.
Yeah, they can do that. They have to define their own related content services and define those correctly for their PeopleSoft components, their custom PeopleSoft components, and then they can create and add that step to the category.
Okay, and we'll do the last one's on notifications. What happens if we have more than one activity due on the same day? Will it send one email per task late, or just one for all the late steps on that day?
I believe it says one for the first late step it finds on that day.
Okay.
So you don't get multiple. We tried to not overwhelm people with getting multiple notifications about every overdue step on the same day. So we tried to send out one, and when they go in the activity guide, there is a display that will show you what's overdue. In the left-hand panel, they'll start to see steps that are marked overdue.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to templates and talk about templates. So we have the category, that's the technical part. The functional part is the templates. If you go into templates, you're going to see this is what we deliver. A lot of these, the ones that don't have trash cans next to them, are system data. So you'll see that within your database. Even if you're not in your demo database, you'll see the ones we deliver with system data. The ones that have trash cans by it are demo data only, and so those only exist within your demo database. But for the sake of this, we're going to look at this offboarding one, voluntary offboarding one. It doesn't have as many steps in it as some, but I think it'll give a good idea of some of the newer functionality as well. You have the ability to do a couple of things here. You can either add a new template, so you can start from scratch. When this page gets pretty big because of things you've added and because of things we've added, you have the ability to filter. And you're only going to see things here that you have security to. So if you don't have security to be able to do things within position management and to manage that template, then you're not going to see that. Okay. And then you won't be able to delete our system data ones. You can inactivate them, but you can't delete them. You can go in and update, and you can clone ours. So again, if you want to take ours and add an effective date, you have the ability to do that, or you have the ability to clone our template and start from that point. If you clone a template, one of the big things I want to mention is you can't change the category. Okay, so you can't clone an offboarding template and make it an onboarding. You can't change the category. You have to stay within the same category as what that template is, because when you're cloning it, you're cloning all the steps with it, and all those steps are based on the category. So that's the reasoning behind that. So we're going to go into offboarding, the voluntary offboarding one, and we're going to go into update. And here I have the ability to add a new effective dated row, or I can update it. And if I go into update, because it's a 1900 row, I'm not going to have the ability to change anything. So I'm going to go in here, and just for the sake of this demo, we're going to go in and add a new effective data row and update that new effective data row. Okay, so we're a little, we like activity guides so much that we actually take you through an activity guide to produce a template for an activity guide. So that's a little ironic in and of itself, but we like activity guides, and this is really a guided process to take you through, so we take you through an activity guide. Here you have the ability, whether you're creating new or you're going into an existing, you have the ability to set descriptions. Once, if I'm creating from brand new, I have the ability to set the category. If I'm updating, cloning, anything, I don't have the ability to set the category. It's going to tell me what category I'm building off of though. So this is being built off the offboarding category. Here I have some options to whether or not to set up autosave, whether to display the side panel, translation options here, and then here's the hide step that Andrew mentioned. Do you want to talk any more about how the hide step works?
It's pretty straightforward. If the current user, if you turn this on and the current user is not assigned to a step in the activity guide, they're not going to see it. So in a multi-user activity guide, you know, the way the functionality worked previously is that the user always saw the step, but it was grayed out, right? So now you'll be able to say, you know, I don't want that grayed out step showing to the user. I want to just explicitly hide it so that they can't see it. So that's what this is giving you the capability of doing.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Security. Here's where you define the security as far as the activity guide template. So what is the role for the administrator and what are the roles for the end users? So in this particular example for offboarding, we have an offboarding employee and we have an offboarding manager. And when we delivered onboarding, I saw one of the questions was, can we have an onboarding employee and onboarding manager? When we delivered onboarding, we didn't have multi-user activity guides. And so multi-user activity guides came later. But you can utilize multi-user within onboarding as well. So, but for offboarding, we do have a multi-user activity guide when we deliver this. So we have an offboarding employee and offboarding manager, but you absolutely can do this within the onboarding activity guide or in any activity guide you create. The ability to do multi-user activity guides is now there and present. Here, you're going to see the actions that are available from the category. So you saw Andrew set up those actions in the category. Here is now at the template level, do I want to make these actions available? Do I want to have the mark complete? Do I want to have the exit? Is there other actions that are available that from the category that I want to make available here? Or do I not want to make them available? And or do I want to change the label of them? So maybe in some cases, I don't want to call it exit or I don't want to call it mark complete. I actually want to change the label to have a different label. Sub banner, what do I want to show? Do I want to show an image? Do I want to show a primary field? Here's where that image that you set up on the category comes in. That's going to be what image is available here. Or do I not want to show a sub banner at all? The next two steps are really the heart and soul of the template. Here's the ability to choose what steps that I have. So in the category, I made that list of every step that's available. And now here I'm deciding for this template, for my offboarding voluntary termination template, what do I want to make available? So I'm saying I want an acknowledgement step for final expenses. I'm not wanting an acknowledgement final check receipt because I only need to do final check acknowledgements that you received it for an involuntary termination. I don't need to do it for a voluntary in this case. I want you to check direct deposit, so I'm giving you that. I don't have any documents that I need you to download, so I'm not worried about that. But I do have some attachments I'm going to ask you for. Maybe I'm going to show you a before to start video, and then voluntary termination checklist for the manager that I've set up, some social media information, a survey, and address and contact information. So those are the steps I'm going to include. Once I select those steps, I now have the ability to organize those steps. And this is really, if I'm the functional user configurator that's setting up this template, I'm spending a little bit of time on all those other steps. I'm spending the majority of my time right here. This is where I'm going in and I'm deciding, do I want to group steps together? So I have the ability to add group steps here if I want to be able to group things together. What order do I want those steps to go into? Do I want there to be any dependencies? So I can't go on to verify phone and social media and these things till I've done the exit survey. I want the exit survey done first. Or maybe there's an acknowledgement that I want people to acknowledge before they do any other step. That's where I want to be able to fill this information out, is on dependencies. So I just simply click what the dependency is, and I say that this step is dependent on what other steps are available, and I can do that here. Configure attributes. This is where I'm going to say whether the steps are required who's the assignee. So you saw that I had the assignees available on the category. Now this is where I'm actually going to say, who is this step assigned to? So here, this step is assigned to the employee. If I cancel here and I go to the manager checklist, I'm going to see that this step is assigned to the manager. So this is where I'm going to define those steps in the template and how they are assigned. Which steps are employee, which steps are manager. And I may have other parties. Employee and manager are ones that we deliver for you for offboarding, but I may have, there's an example that we do at one of the last conferences that had IT security. And so we created a role for IT security and had a checklist step for IT security saying that they've turned off email, turned off access to the network, things like that. And so those are all options. Lock the step after complete, doesn't need to come back to. And then here's where we have due dates and start dates. So if we have specific due dates on the step, this is where we're going to put those due dates. Okay. Going through, we have display and processing here. If I have a couple of different options to display, and Andrew touched on this earlier, I can display activity guides under my processes, which is just an area for me to go to. Another way I might want to do activity guides is through tiles. We deliver an onboarding tile, but with offboarding, we didn't deliver the tile to you. We utilized the utility that I'm hoping to get to very quickly here to show you the ability to do tiles. And then the notifications, if you set up the notifications on the category, it's going to default here to the template. And then we're going to be able to set up which notifications. And then I just simply review this. And since I'm already in one that's active, I have the option to deactivate it, or I can activate it. And that's really the setup for the templates. We're running a little bit fast on time here, so I want to go through here, and if there's questions, please put them in the chat. But I do want to touch on and get to a new functionality that's available that a couple of people have asked in the chat, and I said that we were going to get to, and that's under the utilities. You have the ability to not only do contextual data like Andrew talked to, you have some search key. Template assignments really important for like onboarding and how you assign templates, and you have the ability to test template assignment. But I want to get to the activity guide tiles because this is new or newer with Activity Guide Composer, and we utilize this with offboarding. Rather than delivering a tile to you, we asked activity guides, the people that helped us design this, Andrew, to give us a framework that would help us to utilize this more efficiently going forward. So I'm going to open this up, and we do deliver the offboarding employee and manager tile configuration here. It's not pre-published, but it is delivered. Andrew, do you want to take some time and kind of talk about this concept of the activity guide tile functionality?
Yeah, the activity guide tile can do multiple things. You can define that tile to start an activity guide. So that's why, there's controls here that allow you to, start the activity guide, and you have to specify again another app package routine that will transfer the user to a place where they could start the activity guide. It could be your own custom page. We deliver a starting page that can be used, but that may not meet all your needs when you're starting an activity guide. Maybe there's a lot more information that has to be provided. Or you could just, define the activity guide just to be able to view any instances where I may have a step assigned to me. So, you could just define a tile that says, hey, this is a tile for managers offboarding, and that tile, the manager will see all the activity guides that are coming into his queue that he's being assigned to, because he has some steps in that activity guide to he has some steps in that activity guide where he needs to complete something. As far as and the things you could do here is that you have identify activity guide templates. We also give the ability to utilize template assignment. So you could specify the template assignment definition, and it will determine what templates the user can access when they click on that activity guides, or what templates are associated to this tile is probably the best way to put it. Or you could select them individually. You could say, for this tile, I'm only gonna it only is going to allow the person to start, or no, it's only going to allow the person to view these instances from these templates. Now, if you do set this up to start an activity guide, you can only have one template. You know, if multiple templates could be is possible, then you're gonna have to develop your logic in that instant creation method, that tile start method. You'll have to develop your own logic to determine the right template that should be started, you know, based upon the user that's clicking on the tile or something like that. So, like I said, a lot of flexibility. And then the tile attributes are pretty straightforward. You know, we allow you to pick an image for that tile. We allow you to, you know, specify the security role who could see that tile. And then we allow you to publish it to a home page. Now, the only problem with the published tile is that the user does need to be assigned the portal administrator role. That's something that we're trying to hope to fix in an upcoming enhancement. But right now, that we have heard feedback that, you know, hey, I want to use the published tile, and we've ran into some security issues where the user didn't have access to update a home page. And in order to get around that, you got to give them the portal administrator role. But yeah, that I know we're over by 2 minutes. So if there's anything else that you want to get to, Jeremy, before we finish up.
No, I think that's good. And again, I know that we're over too, so I'll ask the moderator if we have time for questions or if we want to do questions through email. I know that there's people that are having to get off, and we do have quite a few questions on the chat that we were not able to get to, and some of those we'll have to be able to get back to you on. But I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Okay, thank you, you guys. And yes, so we are running out of time, so I will be sure to send these questions over to you all in an email, and then you guys can answer those, and then we will reach back out to the audience. So I just want to remind everyone that this session was recorded and it will be on the Quest website, and everyone will receive an email when that is available. So thanks again, Andrew and Jeremy, for coming and speaking with everyone today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And everyone, we do have our next session for PeopleSoft Week at 12:30. So be sure to head to the Quest website and look for all the sessions throughout this week.